On the day of my 7th anniversary with Sophia, a piece of news shot up to the trending list. The headline read, "The first star discovered by astronomer Sophia is named after the person she loves the most." Sophia commented, "In your name, with your surname among the stars, even in the universe, you are never alone." I was deeply moved, but then I saw that the star had officially been named Zack. I was speechless, because my name is Stephen. Chapter 1, Duncan. "I've decided to take the position at the Paris branch," I said. Before I could finish, Duncan, my childhood friend and business partner, responded quickly, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Are you really going to Paris? Are you willing to leave Sophia behind? If you come back in 2 days only, I'll kill you." I smiled slightly and said, "I'm not joking." Thinking about everything I'd seen tonight, my tone was resolute. I continued, "I won't come back halfway. If I do, I'll bring my head to you." 3 years ago, the company needed someone to go out of town to develop business. After discussing it with Sophia, and seeing she had no objections, I volunteered to go. But on the 3rd day, Sophia was hospitalized for severe stomach pain. I immediately flew back overnight to care for her. Since then, I've stayed at the company headquarters. I've been with Sophia for 5 years, married for 7. Since high school, I knew she was the kind of person who could lose herself in a task and forget everything else. Going to the foreign branch meant I would only see her a few times a year. I couldn't bear to leave her alone here. After we got married, many friends asked how I could be with such a work-focused woman who didn't care much for family. They all said someone like Sophia wasn't suited for marriage. I smiled and answered, "Because she saved me, both mentally and physically. Because of my family background, I developed depression. At the moment when I was about to sink into the depths, it was Sophia who dove in to save me. Afterward, she accompanied me to see psychologists time and again. Rain or shine, she never gave up on me. Once I was better, I asked her, 'Weren't you scared back then? You were so young.' She waved her hand and laughed softly. I couldn't bear to see someone so handsome leave this world, and the future is so long. I want to go through it with you." Smiling, her words were like music to my ears at that time. I once thought that such a wonderful person as Sophia and I could grow old together. But sadly, fantasies are always beautiful. Reality, however, is cruel. Today was supposed to be our 7th wedding anniversary. I had booked the restaurant where we got engaged. I had arranged for fireworks, planning to surprise her. I even left work early to wait for her at the Research Institute entrance. But instead of her, I got a trending news notification. It read, "Our country's latest discovery, the planet numbered 960306, has been officially named Zack star this morning. This is the first star discovered by astronomer Sophia, making it quite a milestone." The first post under this news came from Sophia herself. She wrote, "In your name, with your surname among the stars, even in the universe, you are never alone." Accompanying the post was a photo of her and Zack with their faces pressed together at a Western restaurant. Zack was holding the star's certificate in his hand. I opened the comments section, and the most liked comment was from Zack. It said, "Sharing private romance with the public. Thank you, Sophia. I'm so happy." When I saw this news, I can't even describe how I felt. It was as though I had fallen into a bottomless abyss. The darkness was so deep I couldn't see my hand in front of me, nor could I see any light in the distance. No matter how much I struggled, it was useless. I could only let myself drown in the darkness. At that moment, I thought to myself, Sophia, who saved me, probably never imagined that one day she would become the reason for my depression's relapse. So, life isn't a multiple-choice question. I was never her fixed answer. Just as tears were about to spill from my eyes, I turned off my screen, blinking away the bitter pain. I tossed my phone into the passenger seat and drove to the restaurant I had booked long ago. Under the brilliant fireworks, I ate 2 steaks by myself, a tribute to the nearly 7 years of marriage with Sophia. "Stephen, I'll book the apartment in Paris for you. How about you leave next Monday? It's already Monday, so you have a week to prepare." When I didn't respond, Duncan sensed something was wrong. He cautiously asked, "Are you sure everything's okay with you and Sophia?" I smiled wryly. How could I not know what Duncan was thinking? After all, he had witnessed the entire story of Sophia and me from the start. He must have noticed something off about me and Sophia from my attitude, which is why he was asking. 7 days. There was enough time to wrap up my work here, and enough time to say goodbye to Sophia and my teenage years. I nodded and softly replied, "Okay." Looking out the window at the moonlight, I spoke in a low voice. This time, Duncan was certain there was something wrong with my relationship with Sophia, although he didn't know exactly what had happened. Seeing me, someone who had loved Sophia so much, in this state, he knew it wasn't simple. After thinking for a long time, Duncan said solemnly, "The world is huge. There's all kinds of good food and interesting people. If you're willing to move forward, the future is full of possibilities. Tomorrow is July 1st. Everything is a new beginning. The Paris branch will start operations in a week, brother. Without a woman, there's still a career. The evening wind rustled the curtains on the balcony. I took out a cigarette from my bag and walked to the balcony. Looking at the bright moon, I lit a cigarette. The lighter clicked. It sounded sharp and clear in the quiet night. The smoke swirled out of my mouth and dispersed in the air. Scenes from earlier in the day flashed through my mind again. My heart ached uncontrollably. In that moment, I finally made up my mind. I said, Duncan, you're right. Without a woman, I still have my career. After hanging up, I spoke to the moon. Sophia, I've decided to let you and him go. Chapter 2. When Sophia returned, she immediately saw me standing by the balcony, lost in thought. She put on her slippers and walked toward me. Seeing me smoking, she paused for a moment but said nothing. I had already heard her approach, but I just continued doing my own thing. Ever since I started dating Sophia, I hadn't smoked for a long time, because Sophia didn't like the smell of smoke. It made her frown and feel uncomfortable. So, after we got together, I forced myself to quit, even going through withdrawal symptoms at one point. But this time, I wouldn't make concessions for anyone. Sophia handed me a gift box casually and said, Happy 7th anniversary. Sorry, I had to work overtime. Forgot to tell you, I replied. It's fine. I finished my last puff, then opened the box. Inside was a watch with a star design on the dial. I smiled faintly, closed the box nonchalantly, and said, I like the gift. Thank you. Sophia froze, and the words she wanted to say caught in her throat. She stared at me in surprise, as though expecting me to question her, demand an explanation. I, too, thought that after seeing the trending news, I would angrily confront her, yell at her, and part ways in anger. But as I was about to light another cigarette, Sophia snatched the lighter from my hand. She frowned slightly and said, Didn't I tell you to quit smoking? In truth, she wasn't really angry about the smoking. It was just that she couldn't stand seeing me so calm, so distant. Her frustration was evident. I replied, The craving just hit. I casually put the cigarette back in the pack and stood up to leave for the bedroom. Sophia grabbed my wrist. Her eyes filled with something complicated. Today is our wedding anniversary, she said. I didn't understand, so I asked, So what? Sophia furrowed her brows even tighter, her grip tightening slightly. Biting her lip, she said, You didn't even prepare a gift. You're really going to sleep this early? She then climbed into my arms, stood on tiptoe, and started unbuttoning my shirt. Her lips grazed my chin, moving toward my mouth. But just as our lips were about to meet, I turned my head away. Sophia's kiss landed on my cool chin instead. She whispered, Stephen. Her hands were warm as she began to undress herself. Her voice was low, and her eyes had a hint of desire in them. She looked up at me. In her mind, she thought that if she made the first move, I'd immediately snap out of it and feel better. Thinking this, she slipped her hand inside my shirt again, her lips returning to mine, tempting me. I furrowed my brows and pushed her away forcefully, my gaze dark, like a deep abyss. Sophia stumbled backward, her lower back hitting the guardrail. She winced in pain, looking at me in disbelief. Stephen, why? She asked. Undeniably, Sophia was a master of seduction. Every time we were intimate, I would easily fall into the trap of her gentle teasing. But at this moment, I couldn't focus on that. All I could smell was the lingering scent of men's cologne on her. Yes, it was woody cologne, the same cologne Zack always wore. I took a step back and said flatly, You worked hard tonight. Get some rest. I then ignored Sophia's stunned expression, put my phone down, and went to wash up. When I lay in bed, planning to sleep, Sophia came into the room holding my phone. I frowned slightly. I thought that after I turned her down, Sophia would sulk and sleep in the guest room. I pulled the covers over to my side, which seemed to hurt her feelings. She asked, Stephen, what does it mean that you keep avoiding me? And why did you change our photo on your phone to a countdown calendar? She held the phone with the screen facing me, demanding an explanation. I glanced at it and said indifferently, Nothing. Just switched it for fun. Sophia stood by the bed, staring at me for a long time. I snatched the phone from her hand and shoved it under my pillow, closing my eyes. After a while, Sophia grabbed her pillow and stormed out of the master bedroom. I opened my eyes, turned on the screen, and read the small text beside the countdown. 7 days left until I go abroad. If she really cared, she would have noticed I was leaving by now. But unfortunately, Sophia's heart had already changed. I put the phone down, staring at the ceiling until dawn. Chapter 3. The next day, before dawn, I got up early. I packed up everything that reminded me of the memories of us in the master bedroom, planning to throw them away when I left. I went to the walk-in closet and took out the custom-made suit, which was taking up too much space. I grabbed a pair of scissors and started cutting it into pieces, wrapping the fragments into several bundles. Then, I took our 2 thick wedding photo albums outside. I planned to burn them in the yard while there weren't many people around. The flames illuminated my face, I looked expressionlessly at the albums burning, seeing the two of us, smiling at each other, turn into ash. Sophia screamed, "Stephen, what are you doing?" Sophia, thinking there was a fire, came out to check and found that I was burning our wedding photos. I glanced at her and calmly said, "Nothing." Sophia, enraged by my indifference, tried to rescue the still intact photos from the flames, but the fire was too big, and the intense heat forced her to pull her hands back. Her eyes, red from anger, glared at me. "Why?" she asked. I silently met her gaze for a moment, then turned and walked away. By the time I finished, the sky was completely bright. I was about to shower and head to the office. Sophia followed me into the master bedroom and froze when she saw the empty room and the suit fragments. When I came out of the bathroom, she was crouched on the floor, trying to piece together the wedding dress fragments. I ignored her and went to the balcony to light a cigarette. She said, "It's okay. The wedding dress style from 7 years ago is outdated. We can reshoot with a new style when we have time." I wasn't sure if she was asking me or trying to give herself a reason to accept that I had destroyed our memories, but honestly, I didn't care anymore. Sophia folded the suit fragments and put them aside, then left the master bedroom. By the time I came out, she was surprisingly making breakfast in the kitchen. For a moment, I was stunned. I found out she could cook from Zack's social media posts. Zack liked to document his life. He'd post about all the things Sophia did for him, like making his favorite snail noodles when they worked overtime, picking him up in the rain, and preparing gifts for him on holidays. It was just like this latest trending news, where Zack insisted on having his own star. She generously gave it to him. That night, I tortuously scrolled through Zack's social media, rewatching the story of their relationship. I saw how she treated him differently, how she made him feel special. Sophia said, "Stephen, come have breakfast. I made your favorite millet porridge." Sophia had already composed herself, pretending nothing had happened, pulling me to sit at the table. I took a spoonful, then put it down. Sophia looked at me in confusion. I quietly said, "I only eat sweet millet porridge. Someone once told me, sweet things stimulate dopamine production. So, I craved sweetness." Sophia froze for a few seconds before quickly saying, "The kitchen has eggs. I'll get them for you." I shook my head and said, "No, I'm in a hurry." Yesterday, Zack posted on his social media, "Senior promised to bring me breakfast tomorrow. I want fried eggs and meat millet porridge." Sophia grabbed my arm as I was about to leave, frowning tightly. "Are you mad? Is it just because I didn't accompany you yesterday?" Work suddenly came up. I already apologized. The research is nearing its end. As the head, I can't just focus on romance. You've always supported my work, haven't you? So what's the fuss about this morning? Yes, that's how we've always been. I loved her, so I tolerated everything, even if she forgot my birthday, our anniversary, or sometimes didn't come home for days. I never complained. I knew this was her dream. But then one day, after she completed a research project, she waited for me at the company. I heard her phone constantly ringing. Normally, she found it troublesome to reply to messages, but that day she kept typing without looking up, a smile of joy on her face. That was the first time I heard Zack's name from her lips, a troublesome and awkward junior. It was also the first time I realized she didn't mind replying to messages, didn't mind typing at all. It wasn't that she didn't love me, it was that I wasn't the one she wanted to spend her time on. I pulled my hand away from hers. My gaze was flat as I said, "I'm tired after all these years. We need to." Before I could finish, her phone rang. It was Zack's ringtone. She didn't even look at the screen before answering. "Hello, what's up?" Zack's voice came from the other end, teasing. "Senior, I'm starving. When are you coming back? What if I starve to death and start clinging to you?" Sophia laughed affectionately. "You ate a lot of crayfish yesterday. Already hungry. All right, I'll be back now." I curled my lips into a cold smile. The voice on the other end seemed to sense something and said, "By the way, Senior, you should take your senior Stephen out for a meal. Yesterday was your anniversary. I took your star and made you treat me to late-night snacks. You should thank him with a nice meal." Chapter 4. Upon hearing those words, a flash of guilt crossed Sophia's eyes. She instinctively took a few steps back, still holding her phone. I scoffed, said nothing, and turned to leave. Sophia quickly brushed Zack off with a few words and hurried after me, saying she'd give me a ride to the office. She said, "The research on that star, Zack was also involved in it. I couldn't decide on my own. He was preparing for his birthday and said he wanted a star, so I just went along and gave it to him. The late-night snacks were with a group of people, not just the two of us." Stop overthinking. Okay. I calmly looked at her. She'd been working on the planet research for 3 years. Zack had been involved for only 3 months. Didn't she find that reasoning laughable? Sophia, or perhaps she didn't realize, always tugged at her clothes when she lied or felt nervous. When I was dropped off at the entrance of the neighborhood, Sophia was called away by Zack, because of work or some other reason. I didn't care anymore. This had happened countless times before. This summer, the rain had been unusually heavy. One evening, I got caught in the rain after work, and that night I suddenly spiked a fever. Dazed, I watched as Sophia got up to change clothes. Noticing my gaze, Sophia explained. Zack's cat is sick. He's just a big guy, and he can't take care of it. I'm going to check on it. I stared at her blankly. Just before she was about to leave the room, I called out to her. I had intended to ask her for a cold medicine, but the words changed as I spoke. Sophia, I have a fever. Can you take me to the hospital first? Sophia stood by the door, looking conflicted. She glanced at her vibrating phone and then walked to the living room to grab the medicine kit. She said, "You seem okay. Take a fever reducer for now. Zack's situation is urgent. I'll take you to the hospital once I'm back." She left in a hurry as soon as the words were out. She didn't even notice that I was lying in an 18-degree air-conditioned room, covered with a blanket, drenched in sweat. It wasn't like the summers in college when I would rush into the air-conditioned library after sports class. With her trailing behind me, expressionless, wiping my sweat and scolding me. "You think you're invincible? It's so hot outside, and you're running into the air-conditioned room, and when you get a fever, you'll make me take care of you." I blinked my slightly sore eyes and gave a bitter smile. Hadn't I known all along who was more important to her? What was I even doing? Making myself miserable. My earlier actions made me seem like a fool. By the early morning, I was feeling extremely unwell, so I called an ambulance. After getting an injection at the hospital, I finally started feeling better. The doctor, knowing I hadn't had a checkup in a long time, suggested I do a full body examination. In the end, I only had a blood test and a basic checkup. With work hours approaching, I didn't have time to wait for the test results, so I added the doctor on WeChat to discuss the results later. When I arrived at the office, my dizziness was still quite severe. Duncan noticed immediately. He asked, "Fever, let me take you to the hospital." Duncan dropped the new company documents on my desk and started pulling me toward the door. I yanked him back, patted his hand, and hoarsely said, "I just came from the hospital. It's nothing serious." After Duncan made sure I was truly okay, he pointed at the pile of documents and said, "Hurry up and catch up on the materials. If something goes wrong, I'll kick you out of the company." With the energy of a high school student cramming before the college entrance exam, I pored over the materials until evening. Before leaving the office, I checked my email and saw that the lawyer had already sent over the draft divorce agreement. Holding the divorce papers, I drove through the heavy rain to Sophia's research institute. When I parked in the underground garage, my phone buzzed with a social media notification. It was a video posted by Zack. In the video, Sophia and Zack were attending a recently concluded anime fan meetup. Zack had won a game and, in his excitement, kissed Sophia in the middle of the crowd. The caption read, "When I first met you, I thought that even if we couldn't be open about it, I still wanted to have you. Now, it's finally come true." I had been with Sophia for 12 years, occupying each other's youth. Yet despite all that, I still felt like the woman in the video was a stranger. It was as if I had never known her at all. In the distance, I suddenly heard a hoarse, low growl. Chapter 5. Senior, please, don't leave me. Is it wrong to like you? I've liked you since school. Following the sound, I saw a man cornering a woman by the car. His eyes red as he questioned her. In her moment of despair, the man lowered his head and kissed Sophia on the lips. I watched as her hands, which had been hanging by her sides, instinctively wrapped around his waist as he kissed her. They shared a long kiss in the rainy night. Snap! A sudden flash of lightning lit up the parking lot. "Who?" When Sophia saw it was me, she seemed to lose her soul. She asked, "Steven, how are you here?" I walked toward them step by step. Zack said, "Senior, it's not like that. It's not her fault. It's me who likes her. It's all." Before he could finish, I punched Zack square in the face, knocking him to the ground, and then I ruthlessly kicked him twice. I threw the wedding ring at Sophia. Sophia snapped back to reality, not paying any attention to Zack. Panicked, she said, "Steven, let me explain." "It's not what you think," I interrupted her, handing over the divorce papers. "Sophia, we're done." Without a word, Sophia rushed to chase after me. She said, "Steven, listen to me. My relationship with him is not what you saw." I ignored her, quickly heading toward the car. Sophia stopped me just before I closed the door. Her eyes full of pleading, she said, "Steven, I only see him as a child. It was just a joke." I scoffed. "He's only 3 years younger than us. A giant baby." Sophia's gaze faltered, and an intense unease grew within her. She had a strong premonition that if she let me leave here tonight, it would truly be over between us. She said, "Steven, we've been together for so many years. You can't just abandon me. If you leave, I won't be able to live. Zack is just a passing fling." Her words grew increasingly shaky. A desperate scream from Zack suddenly came from behind. Senior, I've loved you for 10 years. If you don't want me, I don't want to live anymore. Zack held a broken piece of glass against his neck. He said, Sophia, look at me, look at me. If you don't turn back now, I'll slit my throat. Sophia unconsciously let go of me and turned around. I sneered and said, go to him then. Without hesitation, I slammed the door and drove off. In the rearview mirror, I saw Sophia holding Zack, but her eyes were still on the direction I was leaving. I rolled down the window, and in no time, my face was soaked. It was hard to tell if it was tears or rainwater. When I got home, I started packing my things. I had intended to part on good terms with Sophia. But at this moment, I suddenly felt like all the years I had spent with her were a mistake. Wasting 12 years of my youth made me a joke. I just wanted to leave as quickly as possible. Chapter 6. I took out the suitcase from the closet that I hadn't used in a long time. This suitcase was a gift from Sophia when we got married. At the time, when I received it, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I said, Sophia, you're so strange. Who gives a suitcase as a wedding gift? Sophia, acting smug, leaned close to my ear and casually asked, do you like it? Yes, I smiled. Turning to look at her, my warm lips brushed against her cheek. Sophia froze, her breath shallow. Looking into my eyes filled with stars, her heartbeat faltered, and without thinking, she kissed my lips. I pulled her close, cradling her neck as I kissed her back. When the kiss ended, we embraced, breathing heavily. Sophia nuzzled my neck, her voice husky as she said, I have something else you'll like even more. What? I looked down at her, confused. Sophia smiled and kissed my cheek, then knelt down to fiddle with the suitcase. She said, enter the password to open it. The password is your birthday. Curious, I opened it and was immediately stunned. Inside the suitcase, there were 23 neatly arranged gifts. Sophia told me that since she had sometimes neglected my birthdays because of work, this time she was making it up to me with 23 gifts. One for each of my birthdays. She said, Stephen, from now on, I'll remember every one of your birthdays. I was overwhelmed with emotion, hugging her tightly, not wanting to let go. As I recalled that moment, tears streamed down my face. Even though many years had passed, I still clearly remembered how happy and touched I felt back then. But alas, time changes everything, and people change with it. I wiped my tears away and mechanically shoved things back into the suitcase. Halfway through, I received a call from a mutual friend. I cynically thought, Sophia truly was a master of time management. While comforting her little lover, she still managed to have a friend come soothe her. When my friend saw that I was resolute about the divorce, they could only sigh. Stephen, I just hope you won't regret your decision later. As I finished packing and was about to leave, I heard a sound at the front door. I looked up and saw Sophia, drenched in rain. She said, Stephen, don't leave. Can you let me explain? Just as I was about to refuse, the phone beside the suitcase lit up. In that instant, I froze. Sophia, wanting to hug me, stopped in her tracks and bent down to pick up the phone. I felt my heart skip a beat, and before she could, I grabbed the phone and slipped it into my pocket. Sophia, her eyes red, asked, Stephen, what's wrong? My mind had stopped working. I said, it's nothing. The message on my phone was from the doctor. I glanced at it, and just in time, I saw the doctor say I had a tumor. I had always had poor health and didn't enjoy checkups, so I never thought about the possibility of a tumor. Sophia had even fasted, bathed, and prayed many times for my health, but my body never got better. Later, she stopped bringing it up, but now, I instinctively clenched my fists, my mind racing. This illness couldn't have come at a worse time. I didn't want Sophia to know I was sick just yet. Chapter 7. The plan to leave was disrupted. I had no choice but to offer a few vague words to Sophia before lying back down in bed. Seeing this, Sophia tucked me in before heading to the bathroom. Only then did I pick up my phone and text the doctor, asking for an update. Doctor, my health has always been poor. Is it benign or malignant? The doctor was hesitant to make a definitive judgment and simply advised me to go to the hospital for a checkup. Only after getting the results would they be able to make a final conclusion. Reading this response, I felt even more uncertain. Though my relationship with Sophia had come to an end, I still wanted to live. All these years, I had made every effort to take care of my body. Before long, the bathroom door opened. Sophia, wrapped in a towel, walked toward the bed. The bed sank slightly as Sophia climbed in and curled up in my arms. She said, Husband, we haven't been together in a long time. She breathed softly into my ear, her warm breath grazing my earlobe, making me shiver. I instinctively placed my hand on my chest, feeling out of breath. I didn't want to speak the truth, so I could only say in a cold voice, Sophia, let go of me, or go sleep in the guest room. Sophia, aware she was in the wrong today, dared not anger me further. She released me and moved to the other side. Only then did my tense nerves begin to loosen a little. My mind was in chaos, but for the sake of my health, I forced myself to sleep. The next morning, I woke up to find that Sophia was no longer at home. After asking for time off, I went to the hospital alone. When the doctor received my test results, his expression immediately became serious, and my heart sank. When he gave me the final diagnosis, I felt my heart drop to the pit of my stomach. He said, "The situation isn't very optimistic. To minimize the risk of the surgery, you should undergo the procedure as soon as possible." I walked out of the consultation room like a zombie. At that moment, I felt immense guilt, regret, and self-blame. But alas, nothing could be undone. If this is the case, then I must act swiftly. Life must go on, and I didn't want to be held back by anything anymore. I scheduled the surgery for Friday morning and went home to rest. I knew there would be a difficult confrontation waiting for me that night. Since I had to undergo surgery, I decided not to keep it from Sophia. Sophia's reaction to the news that I was ill and needed surgery wouldn't be calm. I needed to conserve my energy, but it was almost midnight, and Sophia still hadn't returned home, nor had she left any message for me. I couldn't describe how I felt at that moment. Was I sad? No. Maybe I was numb. I called Sophia's phone, and it was answered almost immediately. But before I could say anything, Zack's voice came through. He said, "George, Senior is asleep. If you need anything, call back tomorrow." Then he hung up. I wasn't angry. I planned to call Sophia in the morning. There was still time. The next morning, I was already at the hospital, but Sophia's phone remained unreachable. I was about to go in for the surgery when I had the urge to call Duncan. Just then, Sophia's call came through. She said, "Stephen, I'm sorry. My phone ran out of battery. I just turned it on. Last night, our team made a breakthrough, and we were so excited celebrating that I forgot to update you." Sophia quickly explained, worried I might misunderstand. But I wasn't concerned about that. I went straight to the point. "Do you have time to come to the hospital?" Sophia asked anxiously. "Stephen, what's wrong? Are you feeling unwell?" "It's nothing serious, just..." Before I could finish, Zack's scream interrupted me from the other end of the line. Sophia said, "Zack, what's wrong?" In a hurry, she dropped the phone and rushed to check on Zack. I gave a self-deprecating smile and hung up the phone, walking alone toward the operating room. Chapter 8. After work in the evening, Sophia came home early and found the house empty. It was then that she realized I was in the hospital. When she saw me, pale and resting in the hospital bed, a flash of guilt passed through her eyes. She said, "Stephen, I'm sorry. This morning, it's fine." I didn't want to hear it and cut her off. Sophia noticed the large number of medications on the table and sat by my bed, concerned. "Was the surgery successful? How are you feeling? Do you need to be transferred to a better hospital?" I was weak and didn't have the energy to engage in pointless conversations. Slowly, I turned to the other side to rest. "Stephen, don't be upset. When you get better, I'll take you on the Northwestern Grand Loop trip you've been talking about." Okay. 7 years of marriage, and this was the first time Sophia mentioned a trip with me. In the past, whenever I suggested going away to relax, Sophia always had some excuse to decline. Even our honeymoon trip was cancelled because she was busy with work, and the Northwestern Grand Loop, I had already gone by myself. But I didn't want to tell her that. This time, although she was the one to bring up the trip, I knew that before we left, she would find a 100% valid excuse not to go. It was a trip that was destined to remain just words. So, I gave her a perfunctory response, "Okay." Sophia was thrilled that I agreed. In her eyes, my response was a sign that we would reconcile soon. She said, "I knew you still love me, Stephen. I won't disappoint you again." Really, won't disappoint me again. Without expectations, how could there be disappointment? Thinking about it seriously, it wasn't hard to understand why Sophia was drawn to Zack. Her life was bland and uneventful. She came to Beijing from her hometown, worked her way up, and got into the astronomical bureau. In terms of relationships, she had a boyfriend of 12 years. Many people envied her for having such a smooth future. But to Sophia, life was like plain boiled water, ordinary and uneventful. And Zack was the burst of color in her monotonous life. He was handsome, exuberant, and passionate. She couldn't help but be attracted to him. She would accompany him to anime conventions she had never been to, stay up all night racing, and go to the snow-capped mountains to watch the sunrise. She experienced all the things couples do together. Seeing that I was getting better, Sophia applied for time off on Saturday and started sticking to me 24/7. It was as if she was afraid I would regret it. She was constantly trying to please me. She seriously planned the Northwestern trip, from hotels to flights and the itinerary for each day after we arrived. She seemed genuinely excited about this long-delayed honeymoon. I didn't know if it was fate or simply bad luck, but the flight tickets she booked coincided with the day I was supposed to go to Paris. I was playing a game with little interest when my social network pushed an update. Seeing Zack's name, I knew his daily self-torture was about to begin. Since Sophia had taken time off, Zack seemed to have started posting about his feelings for Sophia every day, either to torment me or to annoy me. I watched it all with an expressionless face. Today, it seemed he had reached his breaking point and sent a random message saying, "She will be mine." I smirked slightly and posted an update on my own social network. I wrote, "My wife promised to leave everything behind and travel the world with me. Life is short, every day is precious. The past will always be the past, and we will live happily from now on." Zack couldn't hold back anymore. By the afternoon, he arranged to meet me. In the cafe, I saw him looking haggard. Zack, eyes red, his voice trembling, asked, "Do you love her that much? After all that's happened between us, you still won't give up on her?" I didn't deny it and simply waved my hand. "She said she loves me. Without me, she would die." Zack looked even more distraught. He asked, "Are you leaving? Why? Why didn't she tell me?" I opened the screenshot of the flight ticket Sophia booked and showed it to him. I deliberately said, "I've been with her for 12 years. She cried and begged me to forgive her. I told her that if she was willing to quit her job and leave with me, I would forgive her." She agreed without hesitation. I raised an eyebrow and smiled, but there was no warmth in my eyes. Zack nearly went mad, grabbing his hair and biting his lip, his voice breaking as he shouted from his throat, "Impossible. It's impossible. She said she had feelings for me." I looked at him coldly. Zack really knew how to hurt. On our 7th anniversary, he made a public spectacle with Sophia, putting their relationship on trending, making sure I knew about it. He made sure I saw their entangled mess whenever I saw my car. Over and over again, he had her abandon me and choose him. But Sophia's level of commitment to me became the only flaw in his plan. Despite all his plotting, in the end, his efforts were in vain. Enraged and humiliated, Zack lunged at me, trying to hit me, but I punched him down to the ground. The next moment, I gritted my teeth and kicked him again and again, until I felt discomfort in my body. I then crouched down, grabbed his collar, and mocked, "Kid, if you're going to be a third wheel, you'd better know your place." She was willing to risk her life to save me. "You really think?" I paused for effect and said, "You think you can beat me?" Looking at the unwillingness in his handsome face, I kindly reminded him again, if Sophia really left with me tomorrow, I would forgive her, and we would live happily together. But if she didn't leave with me, then we'd never have a chance again. I didn't say the next part, but seeing the gleam in Zack's eyes, I knew he understood. Chapter 9. At the entrance of the community, Sophia anxiously checked her phone over and over again. She pressed her lips tightly together, looking at me with guilt and apology. She said, "Stephen, this time is different. Zack is threatening to jump off a building at the research institute. We might have to cancel the Northwestern trip." Zack really knew how to hurt himself. I didn't respond. I just calmly looked at her. Without blinking, I mentally etched the image of this woman, whom I had loved for 12 years, into my mind over and over again. When her patience was about to run out, I suddenly spoke. "I already know why you didn't have dinner with me on my birthday." Sophia's face immediately froze, wanting to explain but not knowing how to start. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "That anime meetup had an author Zack really liked. It was his last time attending a meetup. We had agreed that it would be a graduation gift, and I didn't want to turn him down." I laughed softly and replied, "That was also my favorite author." Sophia was stunned for a few seconds, and, in her habitual way, she began. "Then next time I..." Her words were abruptly cut off. I stared into her eyes and firmly said, "There will be no next time." We locked eyes for a few minutes. Suddenly, I looked down and waved my hand at her. "Zack's about to jump. You're the team leader. It wouldn't be right for you not to handle this. Go ahead." Sophia hesitated for a few seconds, then looked at me with pleading eyes and said, "What about the Northwestern Grand Loop?" I curved my lips into a slight smile and replied, "We can talk about it another time." Sophia seemed to have received a reprieve. She rushed out into the rain to take a taxi back to the astronomical bureau. Before heading to the airport, I specifically printed out the medical report and placed it on Sophia's nightstand. Then, I took a taxi to the airport. While waiting for my flight, I aimlessly flipped through my phone. All the photos of Sophia had already been deleted, but I wanted to see if there were any stragglers left behind. When I scrolled to the oldest photos, I indeed found one. It was a snapshot of our engagement day, taken by Duncan. In the photo, Sophia wore a white little dress, and I was kneeling on one knee, holding a ring. Looking at her, I had my hands over my mouth, my face full of shock. Back then, we truly loved each other, but unfortunately, time had passed, and things had changed. Lovers eventually became strangers. After deleting the photo, I closed my eyes to rest. An hour later, I boarded the plane. Destination, Paris. Before takeoff, I sent a compressed file to both our parents and our mutual friends. Chapter 10. At 10 a.m. Paris time, my plane landed. The person Duncan had sent to pick me up was holding a sign in the crowd. I waved and walked toward the person. She said, "Mr. Lin, I'm your new assistant, Carolina." Carolina introduced herself while taking my luggage. I nodded in acknowledgement. Carolina handed me a new phone with a phone card inside. She said, "Mr. Wu specifically instructed me to give this to you. He also told me to let you know that if you want to use this new number from now on, you don't have to worry about anything in China, he'll take care of it." As one of the company's bosses, I had a lot of important clients to maintain relationships with, so I wouldn't change my phone number unless absolutely necessary. Holding the new phone, I felt a surge of gratitude. I said, "I understand. Thank you, Carolina." Confused by my emotional reaction, didn't quite understand why a new phone would make me so emotional. She replied, "It's no problem. Mr. Lin, the car to your residence is waiting outside. Please, follow me." I walked behind my assistant, feeling somewhat detached. Carolina thought I might be homesick after receiving the phone, so she gently tried to comfort me. "Mr. Lin, the branch is still in its early stages, but once it gets on track in a couple of months, you'll be able to work remotely from China." Hearing this, my gaze darkened, but I smiled without saying anything. Carolina noticed this and fell silent, quietly leading the way. In the car, I sat in the back, resting my eyes. Carolina, from the front passenger seat, turned and softly said, "Mr. Lin, Mr. Wu has arranged a welcome banquet for you. Would you like to go straight to the banquet after you rest, or would you prefer to go to your residence first?" I opened my eyes to look at her. Carolina added, "Mr. Wu has arranged for your accommodation in a villa near the company. The welcome banquet is in the south of the city, and the two directions don't align well. The company staff is really looking forward to meeting you." I watched her lips move, but the sound seemed to fade as I began to feel a ringing in my ears. I didn't catch the rest of her words, but from her expression, I could tell. This young assistant was really hoping I would attend the welcome banquet. Since the surgery, I had never had a chance to rest properly. Although the operation was successful, my body was still weak. I had been traveling for nearly 10 hours to get to this new company, and my body was already operating in overdrive. But I couldn't bear to disappoint anyone, especially not Duncan's kindness. I said, "Let's go to the welcome banquet." "All right." Carolina straightened up and told the driver in French to turn the car toward the welcome banquet. The vehicle sped onto the highway. The previously silent car was suddenly interrupted by a buzzing sound. I took out my phone to check. It was a message from Sophia. She wrote, "Steven, please don't be mad. Zack hasn't been doing well, and I'm afraid he might do something drastic again. I have to stay with him tonight and wait until he's in a better state before I come back to be with you. Darling, I love you. Once I'm back, we'll go on the Northwestern Grand Loop trip. Wait for me." I looked at the two messages and couldn't help but smile. I couldn't help but think, Sophia is truly a good woman. She was so afraid that the sound of her conversation with her real husband would disturb her little lover, that even when she stayed out all night, she only sent me a text. Even so, Sophia still had the nerve to say she loved me. It was laughable. I muted my phone and put it back in my bag. Staring out at the fast-moving scenery outside the window, a wave of dizziness hit me, and my body slumped forward. The next thing I knew, I woke up in the hospital. "Mr. Lin, you're awake. You scared me to death." Carolina was sitting beside me, watching the four drip with a haggard expression. I was stunned and noticed the darkened sky outside the window. I asked, "You've been here taking care of me?" As soon as I spoke, I was startled by the raspy sound of my voice. She replied, "Yes, Mr. Wu asked me to take care of you." Carolina stood up, raised the bed for me, and poured me a glass of water. I felt a little guilty and awkward, stiffly saying, "Thank you." Carolina noticed my discomfort and tried to lighten the mood. "You don't have to thank me, Mr. Lin. I'm Duncan's distant cousin, and I've been looked after by him for many years, so I'll make sure to carry out everything he's entrusted me with. If you really feel bad, maybe you could help me pay for the parking fine I got for parking in the emergency lane." I couldn't help but laugh. Chapter 11. Just as I was feeling drowsy, Sophia sent me another message. She asked, "Steven, are you asleep? Why aren't you replying to my messages? I miss you so much." I read the message in a daze, and goosebumps instantly spread across my body. Carolina noticed my reaction and leaned over. She asked, "Is this your wife? It must be around 2 a.m. in Beijing for her to still send you texts at this hour. She really must love you. Mr. Lin, you're so lucky." Love? Lucky? A self-mocking look appeared in my eyes. If I told Carolina that Sophia was sending me these messages from the bed of her lover, would she still think I was lucky? I couldn't think of a reason why. Unless she hadn't gone home, Sophia wouldn't have seen what I had left for her. Carolina asked, "Mr. Lin, why are you silent? Did I guess right?" Carolina was watching me eagerly. I was dizzy from the noise, so I half-jokingly said, "Assistant Caro, if you're really jealous, I can have Duncan introduce you to a boyfriend." "Don't." Carolina immediately shut up and slouched to the side to play on her phone. I couldn't help but chuckle. There was one last 4 drip to finish, and then I could be discharged. I lay on the bed, my body feeling incredibly tired, but I just couldn't fall asleep. I kept thinking, did Sophia not see the compressed file? Why could she so calmly send me flirtatious messages? The more I thought about it, the more irritated I became, so I decided to send the compressed file to Sophia again. I held my phone and waited for a long time, but no new messages came in from Sophia. Feeling frustrated, I tossed my phone aside and tried to close my eyes. Just as I was about to fall asleep, the phone rang. My anger flared up again, thinking that Sophia had finally responded. But when I saw the caller ID, it was my mom. I nearly dropped the phone in shock. I was never afraid of anything in this world, except for hearing my mom cry. I lost my father at a young age, and my mom raised me on her own. She worked hard to put me through school, so I matured early. I was always the model student, getting awards left and right, the perfect child in everyone's eyes. Maybe because of that long period of high-pressure studies, or maybe because I put so much pressure on myself, I unknowingly developed depression. After I went to college, my mom remarried, and my depression worsened. But I had always kept my illness hidden from her. I didn't want her to worry. Now, as I reflected on the impulse I had when I sent that compressed file, I regretted it. I had wanted to appear offline to let the ringtone stop, but it rang again and again, like it wouldn't give up until I answered. I couldn't avoid it any longer, so I took a deep breath and answered the phone. "Mom," she said. "Stephen, you finally answered my call." As soon as my mom heard my voice, she started crying. "Mom, please don't cry. I'm fine." "Really? When you cry, I get worried." My mom sniffled and quickly said, "I'm not crying. Don't worry. Stephen, tell me the truth. Did Sophia really do something wrong? Is everything in the compressed file you sent me true?" I didn't want my mom to worry, but since I had impulsively sent the file to everyone, I could only tell the truth now. "Yes, Mom, I want a divorce." In my mom's eyes, Sophia had always been the perfect daughter-in-law. She loved her dearly, treated her as if she were her own daughter. Sometimes, I even felt jealous, but to think that someone the G family had treated so sincerely could do something so disgusting. My mom knew how much I loved that woman. Hearing me say so calmly that I wanted a divorce, it hurt her deeply. She said, "Stephen, no matter what decision you make, Mom will support you. I just want you to be happy. Your mom and uncle will always be your strongest backing." Her words made my eyes sting with tears. I took a deep breath to hold back the tears, and with a stuffy nose, I replied, "I know, Mom." With the understanding of my family, my heart felt warm, and the dark cloud in my mind cleared up a little. Chapter 12. The next morning, when Sophia woke up, she realized she was lying next to someone. Out of habit, she reached out to embrace the person's waist. Wait. The feeling was all wrong. This wasn't Stephen's body. She widened her eyes in shock and quickly sat up. Yesterday, she had rushed to the research institute to coax Zack down from the rooftop. When she was about to head back to Stephen, Zack had hugged her from behind. He was crying miserably, saying, "Please, don't leave tonight. Okay, senior, please, just tonight. I've loved you for so long. Just stay with me for one night, please." Sophia wavered. In her mind, 2 little voices were pulling at her. One told her to go back because Stephen was waiting for her to go on their trip, but the other voice urged her to stay. Stephen had sent her here. If Stephen got angry, she could just appease him, cry a little more, and he would forgive her. But Zack's tears were so burning, she couldn't bear to leave. Looking at Zack sleeping beside her, Sophia felt as if she was about to lose Stephen. Her heart ached, and she couldn't breathe. She suddenly remembered the nostalgic yet resolute look Stephen had given her when they said goodbye at the neighborhood gate yesterday. It felt as though they might never see each other again. She had sent Stephen several texts, but they were all met with silence. The more she thought about it, the more anxious she became. She hurriedly scrambled on the floor to find her phone. But it was dead. After sending the texts to Stephen, her phone had run out of battery. She vaguely remembered receiving other messages. But at the time, her mind had been consumed by the 2 men, and she hadn't paid attention to anyone else. Sophia grabbed the charger and tried plugging it in several times before it finally started charging. The next 2 minutes felt like 2 centuries to her. Finally, the phone powered up. Sophia immediately called Stephen. The call went through, but he didn't answer, and it kept ringing until it automatically hung up. Sophia's heart tightened, her palms sweating, and a vague sense of unease made her breath quicken. She pressed the redial button twice. This time, the call was quickly disconnected on the other end, and Sophia's heart dropped to the bottom. But the next second, another call came in. Sophia didn't even check the caller ID. She picked up the phone and immediately called out, "Hubby," but she was met with a furious rant from the other side. Sophia was momentarily stunned. And after a moment, she realized that Steven had edited a video of her and Zack and sent it to their relatives and friends. At the end of the video, Steven had added his personal touch. "This video is a wedding gift for Miss Sophia and Mr. Zack. Wishing the two of you a lifetime of happiness." After hanging up, she opened Steven's chat. There was only one message: "The divorce agreement is on the dining table. Sign it and leave my house. Thank you." Chapter 13. Sophia collapsed into tears, and the noise woke Zack. He rubbed his sleepy eyes, sat up, and hugged Sophia's shoulders. His voice was raspy from the aftermath, and he asked, "Senior, what happened?" Sophia, trembling, didn't even consider Zack, who was still holding her. She shakily dialed Steven's number. When the call went through, she felt a brief moment of relief. Steven hadn't blocked her. Did that mean there was still a chance? Zack said, "Senior, don't make that call. Come, look at me." Zack pulled her into his arms and kissed her neck. He said, "That man is old and boring. You've been with him for 12 years, and didn't you say you were already tired of it? Why not stay with me? Wouldn't that be better?" As he spoke, Zack tried to kiss her lips. Sophia's fury exploded in an instant. She slapped Zack hard and shouted, "It's all your fault. You seduced me, and that's why Steven isn't answering my calls." Zack was stunned, touching his reddened cheek, staring at the woman in front of him who was getting dressed. He had been by Sophia's side for so long, and she had never treated him this way. He had always been obedient to her, even better than he was to her husband. Today, Steven didn't answer her phone, and she was furious like this. Why? Zack couldn't understand. As Sophia was about to leave, Zack, shirtless, ran after her. He shouted, "Senior, Sophia, I won't let you go." Zack screamed in desperation several times, but Sophia never looked back and hurriedly walked away. Sophia slammed the door open and sped home, her foot slamming on the accelerator. This summer, there had been a lot of rain. Several times, she almost lost control of the car and nearly caused an accident. The driver she nearly hit shouted at her from his car, swearing in the heavy rain, but Sophia seemed oblivious, as if in a trance, hearing nothing. The only thought in her mind was, go home. Go home and find Steven. He loved her so much, he would soften. If not, she would kneel and beg him. Steven would never be able to resist. Everything was still salvageable. She was sure of it. But when Sophia returned home, the place was empty. It felt like half of the home had vanished. Everything that belonged to Steven was gone. Her mind flashed back to when she had been packing her things earlier. She had joked, "We're just going on a trip, not moving forever. Why are you packing so much?" What had Steven said back then? He hadn't said anything. He had just looked at her calmly. Sophia's heart twisted in pain, as if it were being pierced by needles. So, Steven had already decided to leave her this early. No, that can't be true. It couldn't be. Steven was just angry. He was hiding somewhere waiting for her to coax him. He would forgive her. He would forgive her. Sophia frantically searched the house for anything that belonged to Steven. She told herself that as long as she could find something of his, it meant he would still come back. The house felt empty, but maybe it was just that he didn't like those trinkets anymore. Of course, after 7 years, it was normal for him to have grown tired of them. When he came back, she would take leave and go with him to buy new things. Anything he liked, she would buy it for him, as long as he came back, as long as Steven came back. But after searching for a long time, everything that had belonged to Steven was gone. The last thread of hope in Sophia snapped. She choked. "Steven, you can't be this heartless." Sophia, holding onto the last bit of hope, walked into their bedroom. From a distance, she saw a piece of paper on the bedside table. Her heart leapt. She quickly walked over, but when she saw what was on the paper, she completely broke down. She cried out, "Steven, you underwent such a major surgery, and I didn't even know. I'm the one who failed you. I didn't take care of you properly." Sophia slowly knelt down, her tears falling one by one onto the medical document. Chapter 14. The phone went through, but Steven never answered. With no other choice, Sophia decided to go to Steven's company to find someone. She parked her car at the entrance of Steven's company and hurried inside. However, as soon as she stepped through the company's front door, she was stopped by the security guard downstairs. The guard, with a formal expression, said, "The boss has ordered that people unrelated to the company can't enter." Sophia's heart bled at those words. She assumed that Steven must be inside the company, so she tried to force her way in, but the security guard, determined to do his job, refused to let her go upstairs. Their tug-of-war drew the attention of colleagues working overtime and passers-by. The guard said, "Miss, I won't let you go upstairs no matter what today. If you still care about our chairman Lin, if you want to save some face for him, you wouldn't be so thoughtless." The guard's face was dark and stern, and Sophia finally calmed down. She followed his gaze and looked around. Her heart sank. Most of the company's employees knew she was Steven's wife. She couldn't cause a scene and add to his burden or embarrassment. If she embarrassed him like this, and Steven really decided to leave her, she wouldn't even know where to cry. After apologizing sincerely to the security guard, Sophia got back into her car and went to find one of their mutual friends. But none of them were willing to give her a good face. Desperate, Sophia kept calling Duncan. On her 10th call, Duncan finally answered. Through Duncan, she learned that Steven had been showing signs of a relapse in his depression and had fainted from weakness after surgery, ending up in the hospital. Sophia didn't want to believe it, couldn't believe it. After a few days of asking around, she finally found out that Steven had gone to Paris. He wouldn't be back for 2 or 3 years. Sophia stood frozen in place, her mind going blank, as if struck by lightning. Then she laughed bitterly. The person who used to be so easy to find was now someone she had to work hard to track down. Sophia opened their chat history, and it suddenly hit her. Steven had long been pulling away from her. He had stopped sharing his daily life with her a long time ago. But back then, she had been immersed in Zack. Now, the only response she got from him was a red exclamation mark. She opened his social media, and all of their previous romantic posts were gone. The only thing left was a reposted tweet, which said, "When did you completely give up on someone? After repeated lies and concealments, I hope I can live happily forever." Sophia compulsively refreshed the screen, as if by doing so, Steven's old posts would magically come back. She suddenly remembered 3 years ago, when Steven had gone to Paris for work, but because she had fallen ill, he had decisively returned to take care of her. When he saw her weak and bedridden, his eyes immediately turned red. It was she who comforted him for a long time, soothing him. At that time, Duncan had been angry and helpless because Steven had rushed back, scolding him. "You're the ultimate simp. I have no words for you." How had Steven responded? Sophia suddenly remembered. Steven, looking at her with eyes full of affection, had confidently retorted to Duncan, "My yin-yin is sick. Of course I need to be by her side. What's wrong with being the ultimate simp? I want to be with her for life." Sophia smiled so much her eyes turned into slits. Duncan, disgusted by the sentiment, left the room in a hurry. Sophia stared at Steven's empty social media page and recalled all the beautiful moments they had shared. The first time they met, when he fell for her at first sight, after getting to know each other, the thoughtful companionship he offered, when Steven's condition improved, how she had fallen for him, after they got together, how genuinely happy and content she was, when he proposed, how nervous she was, tears she couldn't hold back, her uncontrollable tears and the overwhelming feeling of having the whole world's happiness. On their wedding day, how she couldn't help but want to possess him, the tears of bittersweet joy. After marriage, their happy and warm little home, until now, when she had lost the boy who once had her heart, lost the happiness and love she had fought so hard to get. When had it started? How had that love and happiness disappeared? 7 years ago, Sophia could never forgive the woman she was now. She deserved to die 1,000 deaths. Her heart felt like it had been shot, riddled with holes, bleeding out. Sophia understood now why Steven had left so decisively, but she just couldn't accept it. A few days ago, she had still tried to use her tears and sweet words to beg for his forgiveness. She thought that if she was humble enough, Steven would never have the heart to turn her away. But she had forgotten that Steven was a stubborn person. After all he had been through, when he decided something, there was no room for negotiation. In their marriage, Sophia had always seen Steven compromising and yielding to her, forgetting his true nature. By the time she realized her mistakes and wanted to make amends, Steven had already made up his mind not to give her another chance. He had taken back his love, and his heart had already died. Steven had given up on her. Sophia panicked, was afraid, and was full of regret. Only when she found out Steven had abandoned her and left the country did she finally understand her own heart. She realized that Zack was just a fleeting distraction in her otherwise happy marriage. The person she had always loved, from the very beginning, was Steven. Zack had threatened her with death, held her with his tears, but her moral conscience stopped her from staying. In the end, she had to convince herself that it was Steven who had sent her to Zack, and that she would indulge herself just this once. She would return to him, and Steven would never know. She had completely destroyed everything. Now, no one was controlling her and Zack flying off together, but she regretted it so much that she felt like killing herself. Chapter 15. After I was discharged from the hospital, I threw myself into work. In just 2 days, I managed to gain the acceptance of the employees in Paris, and they sincerely admired me as their new leader. When Carolina was surprised by my abilities, I didn't even look up from the contract, casually saying, "It's normal." Carolina admired capable people. Otherwise, she wouldn't be so obedient to Duncan. At that moment, her admiration for me reached its peak. It was as if her face was saying, "I'm Steven's little fangirl." As for this trip to Paris, I was satisfied with everything except for one thing. I couldn't understand why Duncan insisted on having Carolina move into my place. The villa next to the company had originally been rented by Duncan for himself, but one day, Carolina gave me a heads up that she was moving in, and at first, I thought she was joking. To my surprise, the afternoon of the same day, she showed up with her bags and moved in. She claimed it was because I'm in a foreign country, and I'm short on funds. I offered to help her out. Carolina then said, "A gentleman doesn't accept unsolicited charity." I was speechless. Was it because Duncan knew I was divorcing Sophia and wanted to irritate her by putting a woman in my home? I couldn't help but chuckle quietly. Duncan was so childish. On the first weekend in Paris, Duncan came for a work inspection. I said, "Chairman Wu, you really are a man of many responsibilities, not even giving your employees time to rest on weekends." I was lounging on the sofa, teasing Duncan. Duncan shot me a glare and bluntly said, "Don't think I can't tell you're accusing me of exploiting the staff." Caught. I held a cushion and smiled, my eyes narrowing with amusement. He said, "Don't change the subject. I'm asking you, are you really going through with the divorce from Sophia? Have you really made up your mind?" I didn't want to talk about her. I grabbed a carton of milk from the table and changed the topic. "Next time you come to Paris, remember to bring me a box of domestic milk. I just feel that foreign milk isn't as pure as the domestic kind." Duncan widened his eyes and sternly said, "Stephen, stop trying to change the subject. Answer my question." I finally stopped avoiding the issue and said seriously, "I've made up my mind. I'm really going to divorce her." He asked, "So Sophia still doesn't agree? Otherwise, she wouldn't keep calling and harassing me." I asked, "She keeps calling you?" I frowned slightly. Duncan raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, I purposely didn't block her so she could feel that there was some hope, but at the same time, no real hope, a sense of despair." I gave him a thumbs up and said, "As expected of you." Duncan ran his hand through his hair and said, "Sophia's little lover must have been kicked to the curb a few days ago. He caused a scene at the company gate. I had the security stop him and warned him that if he came back, I'd report their dirty business to his workplace. It worked, though. He hasn't shown up for a few days now. Honestly, Stephen, you're too easygoing. Sending those embarrassing details to your close friends and mutual friends is pointless. You should have reported them straight to the authorities." I listened without responding. I had only spared Sophia out of consideration for the 12 years we had spent together. If she really pushed me too far one day, I wouldn't hesitate to report everything to their company. Chapter 16. That weekend, Duncan got up early. He was planning to take me out for some serious shopping, but just as I was putting on my shoes, my phone started ringing wildly. "Is this Stephen? I'm Marco. Your mom just fainted and was rushed to the hospital. Stephen, please come quickly." Marco was my mother's second husband. Upon hearing the news, I panicked. Almost dropping my phone, I quickly put on my shoes and rushed out. Duncan thought I was in a hurry to go out, so he chased after me, saying, "Stephen, wait for me." It wasn't until we were in the car on our way to the airport that I finally calmed down enough to explain. "My mom's in the hospital." The car fell into a heavy silence. My mom had always been healthy, so her sudden collapse and hospitalization definitely had other reasons behind it. Thinking back to the half-finished words Marco had said, I guess that Sophia must have gone to my mom's place to beg for forgiveness after being unable to reach me. I said, "Duncan, call Sophia right now. I need to know where she is." I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my face grave. Duncan immediately understood and quickly scrolled through his missed calls to call her back. The phone rang for a long time before being hung up, but Sophia didn't pick up, which only deepened my suspicions. I pursed my lips, my eyes burning with restrained anger. Duncan, worried I might drive recklessly, tried to comfort me the entire way. On the plane, I remained tense. It wasn't until we landed and reached the hospital that I finally relaxed when I saw my mom was awake and in stable condition. Sophia was standing in the corner of the room, staring at me with red eyes, not daring to come forward. After comforting my mom, I glanced at her and walked out of the room. Sophia followed me out of the room, walking into a side security corridor. I pulled out my cigarette case and was about to light one when Sophia came up to me and grabbed my hand, her voice hoarse. "Just now." As soon as she spoke, I shot her an icy look, which made her freeze and let go of my hand. Her eyes flashed with hurt as she awkwardly pulled her hand back. She said, "Stephen, don't smoke. Your body can't handle it." I snorted coldly and stuffed the cigarette back into my pocket. I said, "Whether I can handle it or not has nothing to do with you. Sophia, is my mom in the hospital because of you?" Sophia lowered her head like a child who knew she had done something wrong and didn't dare to speak. That's when I looked at her more carefully, her wrinkled clothes, the dark circles under her eyes, her messy hair. I couldn't reconcile this woman with the meticulous, flawless, and elegant woman I had once known. But so what? She brought this all upon herself. I said, "Sophia, let's take this opportunity and go get our divorce papers. I'll contact you when I've made an appointment." I didn't want to drag it out any longer, so I turned to leave. Sophia had been waiting a long time to see me, so she wasn't going to let me leave so easily. She said, "Stephen, don't go. Don't leave me, please." Sophia blocked my way, and suddenly, she dropped to her knees, holding onto my legs. She begged, "Hubby, I was wrong. I truly realize my mistake. Please, for the sake of the good times we had, forgive me this one last time, please." I stood still, unmoving. I could feel her tears soaking through my pants. I said, "Sophia, your tears aren't worth anything." I neither pushed her away nor accepted her apology. I just spoke in a cold tone. Sophia trembled as she pleaded, "Hubby, I beg you, give me one more chance. This time, I won't do anything to hurt you again. I'll take care of you." The mention of her body set me off. I felt like an angry cat, all my nerves on edge. I slapped her hard across the face and said harshly, "Sophia, you're a heartless bitch. You don't deserve me. Don't call me hubby. It disgusts me. Go to the Civil Affairs Bureau tomorrow and get the divorce certificate, or you'll wait for me to sue you." Without looking back, I walked away, but just before I left, I heard her voice again. She said, "Stephen, I saw the diagnosis. It's because I didn't take you to the hospital in time that it got worse, right?" When she asked that, I clearly heard the tremble in her voice. If this were before, I would never have let her blame herself like that. I would have lied to comfort her. But now, with my back to her, I answered firmly, "Yes, it's all because of you. All the pain I've suffered is your fault." As soon as I said that, Sophia couldn't control her emotions anymore. She collapsed to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably, her body racked with pain. She no longer had the strength or courage to stop me. Chapter 17. After returning to Beijing, I didn't go home but went straight to a hotel. My mom was no longer in critical condition, so I didn't need to stay at the hospital. After arranging everything, I returned to the hotel to rest. That night, there was a heavy rain. I tossed and turned, unable to sleep, so I took out the portable notebook I always carry with me and started working. Around 1 a.m., the doorbell to my room rang. I put down my laptop, grabbed a glass vase from the side, and quietly walked to the door. I couldn't see anyone through the peephole, so I became even more cautious. I asked, "Who is it? If you don't answer, I'll call the police." A hotel staff member stuck their head out, quickly waving their hands and explaining, "I'm terribly sorry to bother you at this hour, but we really don't know what else to do. There's someone downstairs, kneeling in the rain, and it's seriously affecting the hotel's operations. Could you please come down and take a look?" I lowered my guard, confused, and asked, "If someone's kneeling in the rain, why not just call the police? What do you need me for?" The staff member looked uncomfortable and said, "This kind of situation is the hotel's worst nightmare. Calling the police without cause could cause unnecessary panic and reduce guest traffic." The person said their name is Sophia, and she's your wife. This is your personal matter. So, well, you see. Hearing that name sent a chill down my spine. I had sent Sophia a divorce appointment notice earlier that night, and she must have come to make a scene about it. I didn't want to make things difficult for the staff, so I reluctantly put on my clothes and followed them downstairs. A crowd had gathered outside the hotel, watching. Even though it was already late, Beijing's streets were never empty, with people always rushing by at all hours. I pushed through the crowd and walked toward the rain. At this point, I didn't know how long Sophia had been kneeling in the rain, but her entire body was soaked, and her face was so pale that she looked like she might pass out any moment. When she saw me, her eyes lit up. She crawled to me, wanting to hug me but too afraid I would reject her. In the end, she could only clench her fists, sadly looking up at me and saying, "Stephen, I knew you'd come out to see me. You've forgiven me, right?" I didn't know how she came to that conclusion. Standing under the dark umbrella, I looked down at her and said, "Sophia, you." Before I could finish my sentence, Sophia's phone rang. At this hour, the number of people who could be calling her was very limited, so I fell silent and glanced at the phone in her pocket, which kept lighting up and then going dark. I said, "Aren't you going to answer? Maybe they really have an urgent matter. Perhaps it's the light bulb that's broken again, and if you don't pick up in time, your little lover might get hurt. I'll have no way to explain it." "Stephen, please don't say that." Sophia's eyes filled with hurt. How could she not know I was mocking her? If she hadn't gone to take care of Zack's cat and delayed my treatment, I wouldn't have suffered so much. Every time I thought of what happened, she hated herself, wishing she could destroy everything. Under my cold gaze, Sophia trembled and took out her phone. The caller ID read, "Zack." Seeing my indifferent expression, Sophia's heart sank. She asked, "Stephen, do you really not care about me anymore?" I raised an eyebrow nonchalantly and even spoke a few words on Zack's behalf. The poor guy is all alone, struggling in Beijing. As a friend, as a superior, it's only right that you check on him. My words were like daggers, further tearing her already broken heart. Sophia's body swayed as if she was about to collapse. She said, Stephen, please, don't say that. Don't treat me like this. I'll never let anyone take me away from you again. Don't. I can't bear it. I took a step back to avoid her, then smiled coldly. Didn't you tell me he was all alone? I leaned slightly closer to her and said, you should feel sorry for him. Our gazes met, and Sophia clearly saw the mockery in my eyes. A sharp, heart-wrenching pain surged up in her chest, and her eyes burned with unshed tears. The tears mixed with the rain and silently slid down her face. Only her slightly trembling shoulders betrayed how heartbroken she was. I glanced at her in disdain and stood up. Just as I was about to say something, my phone vibrated cheerfully in my hand. I slowly read the unknown number and looked up at Sophia, saying, your little lover. From the panic in her eyes, I knew I was right. She pleaded, Stephen, don't answer it. Sophia tried to get up, but after kneeling for so long, she collapsed again. I watched her disgraceful fall without any reaction. I answered the call and switched to speakerphone. Zack's frantic voice instantly blared through the speaker. He cursed. Stephen, you bastard. Why don't you just die? Give Sophia back to me. Zack, shut up. Sophia screamed, losing control. I smiled sarcastically, crouching down beside her and speaking elegantly. Zack, you really want to see her, don't you? I'll make it happen. Chapter 18. Zack growled in a hoarse voice. Stephen, what do you mean? I said. Don't rush. I tucked my phone into my pocket, then reached into Sophia's pocket with one hand. Sophia stiffened and stared at me without blinking. I picked up Sophia's phone, successfully unlocked it, and scrolled through WeChat. Finally, I removed Zack from the blacklist and made a video call. Sophia saw what I was doing and softly asked, Stephen, what are you doing? I gave her a wait-and-see look. When the video call connected, Zack spoke with joy. Senior, you finally decided to talk to me. But when he saw me on the other end, Zack's handsome face immediately twisted in disgust. He said, Stephen, do you have no shame? We've already slept together, and you still won't let go. Sophia shouted, Zack, you bastard. Shut up. She desperately tried to grab the phone. I was quick to raise it out of her reach, then turned the camera to face her. I said, Zack, your woman is kneeling outside my hotel door, begging me to forgive her. You can see all these witnesses. I spun the phone around, then smiled and said, you see, she's trying so hard. Shouldn't I give her a chance? On the other end, Zack froze for a moment before glaring at me and saying, Stephen, you're a bastard. You dare. I laughed. Why wouldn't I dare? Don't forget, legally, I'm still her husband, and you're just a nobody, a mistress who can't even show her face. Before Zack could lose it again, I ended the video call and hung up. I handed the phone back to Sophia. She remained frozen, kneeling there, her eyes filled with a glimmer of hope. It dawned on me that the lies I'd told to anger Zack had also fooled Sophia. I threw the phone in her face and suddenly stood up. In a cold tone, I said, Sophia, stop dreaming. Everything I just said was a lie. While I still have some patience left, you better get out. Before leaving, I added, by the way, I just broke your little lover. You should go comfort him, or you'll lose him and your dignity. I laughed heartily, and Sophia finally realized that I'd been lying to her. As I walked away, Sophia could no longer control herself. She screamed, and overwhelming pain seemed to engulf her like an invisible wave. She covered her face with both hands and cried uncontrollably. Chapter 19. After my mom was discharged from the hospital, she urged me to return to Paris as soon as possible. I had originally planned to stay with her longer, but I had stayed up all night finishing the necessary work for the week. Seeing her in such good spirits, I felt reassured. Before I left, my mom pulled me aside to talk. She said, Stephen, your mother fainted because of that wicked woman, Sophia. You absolutely can't let her trick you again. I asked, don't worry, Mom. I won't forgive her again. But I'm curious, what exactly did Sophia do? As soon as Sophia's name was mentioned, my mom fumed and cursed. That little bitch. She knelt outside our door for 2 days begging me and your Uncle G for forgiveness. The neighbors all know why she was kneeling. It almost made me the laughingstock of the whole street. I've never been humiliated like that. I quickly comforted my mom. She lived in our rural hometown, where she'd always been tough, but she hated people gossiping behind her back. And in the countryside, rumors spread fast. Sophia's actions had definitely angered my mom. I said, Mom, don't be upset. I'll have a good talk with Sophia, and she'll never disturb your life with Uncle G again. When my mom heard this, she quickly reminded me, Stephen, it's fine if I'm the one who bears a little pain, but you can't forgive her again. You're such a good-looking, capable young man. I'm sure you'll meet someone much better. Her words almost made me tear up. After I reassured her again, my mom finally calmed down. I wanted to send her home, but my mom insisted I stay in Beijing. She said, Stephen, you've got the divorce papers, right? Hurry back to Paris. That guy works at the astronomy bureau, and without approval, he can't leave the country. This way, You can start your new life, with no other choice. I rented a car for my mom and reminded her to check in with me once she got home. After sending her off, I checked the divorce appointment. There was still plenty of time left. I tried contacting Sophia, but her phone was unreachable. I thought about going home to see if she had signed the divorce papers, but when I arrived home, I found Sophia collapsed at the entrance. I kicked the woman on the floor, and when she didn't wake up, I crouched down and carried her to the sofa. I checked her temperature and realized she had a fever. I didn't bother with her further, but instead grabbed her phone and sent Zack a text message. "Dear, I have a fever. Can you come take care of me?" The reply came quickly, and I saw Zack had already left. I could imagine how thrilled Zack must be right now. I searched the entire house, and finally, in the bedroom trash can, I found pieces of the divorce agreement. Furious, I kicked the trash can across the room. The noise woke Sophia up from the living room. She asked, "Stephen, is that you?" I stormed out, holding the torn pieces of paper, and demanded, "Sophia, what the hell do you want?" Sophia looked at me, wounded, trying to get up but too weak to move. I closed my eyes, then said coldly, "Forget it. Since you're awake, let's go to the Civil Affairs Bureau and get the divorce certificate." But in the end, we didn't get the divorce certificate. Seeing the time was almost up and Zack was about to arrive, I angrily slammed the door and left. When Sophia chased after me, I was already in a taxi. She ran after the cab, tripping and getting up again, looking a mess. It wasn't until Zack arrived and held her tightly that she stopped running. I sneered and muttered, "You really can't teach a dog to stop eating shit." Chapter 20. After returning to Paris, I went straight to the office. Having not rested properly for over 10 hours, I was at the point where I was tired but couldn't fall asleep. When Carolina entered with a coffee, I was rubbing my temples at my desk. Hearing the noise, I opened my eyes and looked at her. She said, "Chairman Lin, coffee." Carolina gently placed the coffee in front of me. I took a small sip, and, whether it was psychological or not, I instantly felt refreshed. I said, "Thank you. I've been so worn out. This coffee just saved me." I joked as I thanked her, and successfully made Carolina laugh. That evening, Carolina drove me home. We lived in the same villa, with Carolina on the first floor and me on the second. The space was big enough that it would be hard to run into each other unless we tried. But tonight, Carolina specially made some domestic dishes and invited me downstairs to eat. I wanted to refuse, but didn't want to hurt her feelings. The food was delicious, and I couldn't help but glance at Carolina a few times. After dinner, I volunteered to clean up the dishes. When I finally lay back in bed, Duncan sent me a text. "I know you're feeling down, but at least a good meal in a foreign land should comfort your wounded heart." I smiled wryly, knowing Duncan was probably the one pulling strings behind the scenes. As the night grew deeper, I started feeling sleepy. Just as I was about to drift off, there was a rapid knock on the door. "Chairman Lin, are you asleep?" "What is it?" I quickly got dressed and opened the door. Carolina, with a worried expression, pulled me out of the room. She said, "Chairman Lin, a fellow countryman is kneeling at our doorstep. It's causing quite a stir among the foreigners. She's probably here for you." I immediately guessed who it was, and my temples began to throb. When I saw Sophia, the first thing I said was, "Aren't you not allowed to leave the country?" Sophia trembled slightly, her face showing uncontrollable excitement. She said, "Stephen, you're concerned about me." I rolled my eyes and coldly replied, "I'm just wondering how the Astronomy Bureau could approve your trip abroad, letting you come here to cause trouble." The light in Sophia's eyes immediately faded, and she lowered her head, whispering, "I didn't report it to the company. I left the country without permission." "Stephen, seeing how sincere I am, can you give me another chance?" Sophia lifted her head, her eyes filled with pain and despair. I frowned, walked down the stairs, and dragged her into the villa. I said, "Sophia, is your dignity so cheap? Didn't you see all the people recording videos? Do you really want to make a name for yourself online?" Sophia actually didn't care about that. She'd already lost her husband. What did she have left to lose? She wanted everyone to see how determined she was to win me back, but I was very concerned about appearances. So Sophia had no choice but to follow me. Even though I was dragging her like a chicken, she was strangely happy, because it was better than me avoiding her. Once inside the villa, Sophia realized I wasn't living alone. There were women's things around. Her heart immediately dropped, and she wanted to ask, but when she saw my expression, it turned into a self-deprecating smile. Her desire to hold me and her greed grew wildly in that instant. Sophia took a step closer, her eyes filled with sorrow and deep affection, almost drowning me, but I could see nothing but impatience and anger in her eyes. I said, "Sophia, if you take one more step, I'll call the Astronomy Bureau and report you." With just that sentence, all the courage Sophia had built up vanished. She stood still, 1 meter away, afraid to move. Before I lost my patience, she took out a star certificate from her pocket and handed it to me with hope in her eyes. "Stephen, look, I've named a star after you. See? I glanced at it indifferently and scoffed. Sophia, are you stupid, or am I? You bring a fake certificate and claim you named a star after me. Are you here to make a joke? Discovering a new star wasn't that simple. Even if she had found one, it would have been reported in the news, not quietly handed to me. Sophia's eyes flashed with a hint of panic as she quickly explained. Stephen, I'll make this star certificate real. I promise I will. Her gaze grew more determined as she continued. Stephen, I know you won't easily forgive me for my past mistakes, but can you give me a chance to make things right? I'll give you the real certificate. I'll go with you on a trip around the Northwest Loop. I'll prove to you that I love you, that you're the only one in my heart, and my husband will always be you. Please, just let me slowly get back into your life. Stephen, I beg you. Sophia spoke with such emotion that if I hadn't known her for 12 years, I might have been moved by her words tonight. I asked, is your resolution complete? I looked up from my phone, opening my mouth with amusement. Hurry up and go back to your country. The leadership at the Astronomy Bureau is probably going crazy looking for you. Sophia froze for a moment, then spoke with a dead voice. Stephen, you really reported me. Do you hate me this much? I quickly interrupted. Stop making false accusations. It was your little lover who reported you. Chapter 21. Upon hearing this, Sophia quickly took out her phone. In order to avoid being disturbed, she had turned it off earlier. Now, the missed calls and unread messages were nearly overwhelming the phone. Sophia's chest heaved with anger, but there was no time to spare. She barely left a few words behind before rushing straight to the airport. Only then did Carolina come out of the kitchen, asking, Chairman Lin, are you okay? I waved my hand and walked upstairs, saying, if this happens again, just call the police and report someone trespassing. After arriving in Beijing, Sophia didn't go to the Astronomy Bureau but went straight home. As she opened the door, Zack, shirtless, grabbed her and pulled her into his arms. He said, Senior, I knew you'd come back to find me. I'm the one who loves you the most in this world. Sophia's face darkened, and she pushed him away. Zack was taken aback and tried to grab her again. Without a hint of sympathy, Sophia slapped him hard and then shoved him against the shoe rack at the entrance. She said, Zack, what do you gain by ruining me? At that moment, Sophia hated him with all her heart. She grabbed his wrist, pulling him toward her. Her eyes filled with hatred as if she wanted to slice him into pieces. Zack looked at her in fear and then, with a low laugh, said, I do. If I didn't ruin you, would you have come back so easily to me? Zack, you bastard. Zack smirked, tears streaming from his eyes. He said, bastard, didn't you enjoy it in bed? You even drove your husband away. Sophia, you deserve this. Pain was written all over Zack's face, but he had to speak, as though hurting her would somehow ease his own suffering. Sophia slapped him again, with such force that Zack took a long time to recover. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. But Sophia seemed not to notice. Her eyes were red with fury as she thought about how her career, her husband, had all been ruined because of this bastard. She was consumed by rage, immense, uncontrollable rage. Sophia blamed Zack for everything. She yelled, bastard, don't think I don't know what you've been doing behind my back. She grabbed Zack's arm and, using all her strength, dragged him out onto the street. Since you have no shame and want to ruin my future, then don't think you'll get away unscathed. Zack desperately tried to break free, but his former glory was exposed to the onlookers on the street. At that moment, Zack was completely panicked, crying out in agony, Senior, I was wrong. I truly was wrong. Please, don't do this to me. Sophia ignored him and dragged him to the car, driving straight to the Astronomy Bureau. Along the way, Zack begged for mercy, but when that didn't work, he tried calling the police. Sophia snatched his phone and threw it out the window. With her foot pressed firmly on the accelerator, the car sped forward like an arrow. Before Zack could faint from fear, Sophia slammed on the brakes, bringing the car to a halt. As soon as they arrived at the Astronomy Bureau, many people rushed out. Sophia's superior hurried over, his face filled with concern and urgency. Sophia, how could you leave the country without permission? You're a key member of our team. The higher-ups know you've gone abroad, and they plan to marginalize you. Come with me to the leadership office and apologize sincerely. It's your last chance. The leader urgently guided Sophia to the office, but she stumbled as she followed. Once she steadied herself, Sophia stopped walking. The leader turned around, his face full of confusion and concern. Sophia replied, I've let you down. Having calmed down from her rage, Sophia looked at him with tears in her eyes and sincerely apologized. The leader didn't understand, but when he followed the gaze of the curious colleagues, he finally noticed Zack, nearly naked. What's going on? The leader asked in shock. Sophia turned back, pulling Zack toward her and revealing the truth. Zack, a member of my team, this bastard right here. He's the one who seduced me, leading to my divorce and losing my husband. Zack screamed, No, that's not true. He was breaking down. covering his face and pleading, "Please, stop, I won't bother you again." Sophia smiled coldly and continued, "This bastard not only seduced me, but also, while we were in an affair, seduced the wife of a big shot from City B and slept with her. A scumbag like this deserves the scorn of everyone." By now, the colleagues were completely stunned by the shocking news, and Sophia continued her tirade, "I'm exposing this today not only to rid the world of harm but also to show my husband, who's abroad, that I am determined, even if he never forgives me, I will love him forever." Many people were recording videos, and Sophia boldly declared in front of the cameras. In the midst of the chaos, police cars and the big shot from City B arrived. Sophia and Zack were both taken away by the police. The big shot from City B never got out of his car and followed the police car to the station. No one knew exactly who the big shot from Beijing was, but they all knew Zack's career was finished. Not only had he ruined his future, but he would never be able to stay in City B again. 2 days later, after the constant efforts of the Astronomy Bureau's leadership, Sophia was released. The Liu family, upon learning of their daughter's actions, unilaterally declared the termination of their father-daughter and mother-daughter relationships. Sophia's actions caused severe negative consequences. Although she had made significant contributions, the Astronomy Bureau ultimately decided to fire her. Sophia lost her job, her former glory, and her family. She was now truly a solitary person. With a case of beer in hand, she climbed to the rooftop of her home and drank under the moonlit sky. A smile lingered on her lips, but tears continually streamed from her eyes. The incident made the news and was reported repeatedly. She didn't believe Stephen hadn't heard about it, but he never said a word, not even a casual check-in. But Sophia didn't regret it. This was her punishment. Zack disappeared from the streets and alleys of Beijing, but Sophia knew that it was the big shot's wife who had taken him away. That woman depended on the big shot to live, and the big shot wasn't someone you could easily brush off. He was ruthless. Zack's end would be 1,000 times worse than hers. Chapter 22. I did see the news, but I only thought of it as a joke. Work in Paris was going increasingly well, and I was gradually adapting to life here. In my spare time, I liked to sit in a little cafe tucked away in a quiet alley. I would order a coffee, perhaps a slice of cake, and spend my evenings watching the people pass by. Life felt so pleasant. One day, while holding my coffee and reading under the sunlight, I received a call from Sophia. We hadn't been in touch for a long time, and hearing her voice again, I felt that it had a rough, grating edge, as if her voice had been scraped with sandpaper. She said, "Stephen, I really miss you." I frowned slightly, pulling the phone away from my ear. Taking a sip of my coffee, I spoke in a calm tone. "Have you signed the divorce agreement? Once you've signed it, just send it to my house or to the office. Don't contact me unless it's about that." There was a long silence on the other end. Just before I was about to hang up, she suddenly spoke. "I'm sorry." Then, I heard her breaking down into uncontrollable sobs, her voice full of sadness and panic. As though she had lost everything, she said, "Stephen, please, give me one more chance." "What do you want me to do?" "I'll do anything. Please, don't leave me. We've been together for 12 years. If you don't want me, how am I supposed to live? I've made everything I did wrong public. For you, I'm willing to be scorned and cursed by everyone. Doesn't that at least make up for some of the mistakes I made?" I couldn't help but laugh. Upon hearing my laugh, Sophia's crying suddenly stopped. She asked helplessly, "Stephen, what are you laughing at?" I closed the book, settled comfortably on the sofa, and replied in a calm tone, "Sophia, you're still the same. After all these years, you've always been like this. You're so sure I love you, that if you just shed a few tears, I'll feel sorry for you and forgive you. Yes, that's how I used to be, but have you ever thought about it? I don't love you anymore." Sophia went silent for a moment, then she broke down and screamed, "No, I don't believe you, Stephen. I don't believe that you don't love me anymore. You used to love me so much. How could you suddenly stop loving me? I only made a small mistake. I've already realized my wrongs. Why won't you give me another chance to make things right?" Hearing this, I realized she still hadn't understood her mistakes. In her mind, as long as she made herself miserable enough for me to feel sorry for her, I would be obligated to forgive her and take her back. I was so tired after all these years. At this point, there was nothing more to say to Sophia. Rubbing my temples, I spoke coldly. "Sophia, please stop disturbing my life. Since you're willing to sign the divorce agreement, after 2 years of separation, I'll file for divorce." As soon as I finished speaking, I hung up the phone, not wanting to hear any more of her words. Chapter 23. Time flew by, and soon it was late autumn. Duncan's wedding was fast approaching. After finishing my work in Paris, I returned to the country 3 days early. I spent my time running around helping Duncan, more exhausted than after weeks of non-stop work. Duncan deliberately came over and teased, "Chairman Lin, you've worked hard. Next time you get married, I'll be the one running around serving you." I slouched on the sofa and swung my fist, saying, "Are you asking for a beating? What wedding? Who am I even marrying?" Duncan quickly backed off and exchanged looks with Carolina. I got up, followed his gaze, and immediately fumed. "Duncan, you're asking for it." Amid the playful teasing, the wedding day arrived. I didn't expect to see Sophia at Duncan's wedding. My face soured, but I understood. The problem with being with Sophia for so long was the sheer number of mutual friends we had. When I walked into the wedding venue, Sophia was there, wearing a white cocktail dress, holding a bouquet of red roses. People were staring at her, but she seemed oblivious to it. As soon as she saw me, her eyes lit up. Sophia walked toward me step by step. I watched her closely and realized she was even thinner than before, her complexion looking worse. Sophia had lost her job, her reputation, and me because of the Zack incident. She was no longer the proud and confident woman she once was. Our mutual friends didn't welcome her anymore. All of this I learned from Duncan the day after I returned. I wasn't affected by it. I just thought Sophia had lost her mind. She had reaped what she sowed, and it was all her fault. Since that phone call, I hadn't answered any of Sophia's calls. I was living carefree in Paris, only concerned about Duncan and my mother. I didn't want to waste time thinking about people who no longer mattered. Sophia, looking at me, bright and handsome, was torn between comfort and pain. Comforted because she had finally seen the men she had longed for, and pained because behind me was an atmosphere of happiness, in stark contrast to the despair she was living. She gazed at me with a faint hope and said with difficulty, "Stephen, after all this time, are you still angry with me? I really love you. I can't live without you." I stared at her steadily. Back in university, whenever I saw a couple getting married, I would buy a rose and give it to Sophia. I didn't know how I would feel seeing her again, whether anger, fatigue, or disgust. But to my surprise, I felt nothing at all. During this time, while working hard, I also met many new friends. Both my wallet and my heart were full. Duncan's calling. "Stephen, hurry up and come take a photo." Duncan shouted from inside. I raised my hand and waved toward him. Before leaving, I looked seriously at the woman in front of me and said, "Sophia, don't do anything meaningless anymore. We all need to move forward." Sophia's face turned even paler, and her body swayed as if she were about to collapse. I didn't care. I walked past her and went inside to take photos. People move forward, and flowers bloom toward the sun. No one stays in the same place waiting for you.